Hello again, this is Mr. V. Hill. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about standard form for linear equations specifically. And so just to review a little bit, the two forms that we've talked about so far, the first one was slope-intercept form, and that looks like y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept, hence the name slope-intercept form. Then we also talked about point-slope form, which looks like y is equal to m times the quantity x minus x1 plus y1, where again m is the slope, and now x1 and y1 are coordinates of a point that we know is on the line. The third form that we're going to be studying here is called standard form, which looks like this. A times x plus b times y equals c, where a, b, and c are integers. Now, this name standard form is a little bit unfortunate. We'll talk a bunch about that in class next time. Actually, for the purposes of Algebra 1, this is actually standard form. But we'll get into why that is and why this is really just a horrible name. And, well, there's actually some really good stuff to it, but we won't talk about it right now. We'll talk about that in class. But then one little more condition we can put on here and call it simplified standard form is it's just like standard form, where you have a number times a plus a number times x plus a number times y equals some number. But now we're going to have the first number, a, has to be greater than or equal to 0. So meaning it can't be negative. And also a, b, and c are relatively prime, meaning they have no common factors, of course, other than 1. And so let's just work through an example to see how this works. And so we want to write the equation for the line through these 2 points, -8, -5, and 4, 3, in simplified standard form. So the way we're going to start out is by writing point-slope form, because point-slope form is really easy to write. So for point-slope form, we already have 2 points. We could choose either one, but we still need to find the slope. But we know how to do that. We just take the difference in the y's, 3 minus -5, and divide that by the difference in the x's, 4 minus -8. And we simplify that down a little bit. 3 minus a -5 would be a positive 8. And 4 minus -8 would be a positive 12. But 8/12 is, of course, just 2/3. There we go. Now we can write the point-slope form. Really easy. So that's just going to be y is equal to the slope, 2/3, times x minus the x-coordinate of a point, plus the y-coordinate of a point. No problem. Or, if we want to use this other point, we could write it y is equal to the slope 2/3 times x minus the y-coordinate, which is 4, plus the y-coordinate. Excuse me, x minus the x-coordinate plus the y-coordinate, using the second point here. So, there's our 2 point-slope form equations. If we simplify those, we'll get the slope-intercept equation. And that's really easy to do. All we've got to do here is distribute in the slope and then combine the like terms. Now really quick, just because I hate subtractions and especially subtracting negatives, I'll have this, change this to plus a positive 8. And I can change this to plus -4, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Now I'll just distribute in the 2/3 here, and I'll even do this to both equations at the same time. So we get y is equal to 2/3 times x plus 2/3 times 8 would be 16/3 plus -5. And then if we simplify this just by combining these like terms, let's see here, -5 would be a -15/3. So we add 16/3 plus -15/3, and we get y is equal to 2/3 x plus 1/3. And there's our slope-intercept equation. We could do the same thing over here with this one. So we have y is equal to 2/3 times x plus 2/3 times -4. That's going to be a -8/3, still plus 3. Now 3 is going to be 9/3, so we add these together, -8/3 plus 9/3. That's going to be 1/3. And notice, hey, these are both the same. That's great, which means we probably did it right so far. If you do this with and get two different slope-intercept equations, then you messed up somewhere along the lines. Probably you found slope incorrectly. You might have flipped these x coordinates down here and got the negative of the slope that you wanted. That's a very common error. But now we can switch this equation, the slope-intercept form, into standard form pretty easy. All we got to do is get the x and the y's together, kind of. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 2/3 x, or add -2/3 x to both sides. Getting rid of those on this side. So we'll have -2/3 x plus y is equal to 1/3. But remember that these numbers, the coefficients of x and y and this constant term, have to be integers. Here we have some fractions. So an easy way of getting rid of that is just multiply by the least common multiple of the denominators. Just clearing denominators again. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3 and distribute this in. Don't forget to distribute it over to the y. It's a very common error to forget that. So 3 times the -2/3 x is -2x plus 3y is equal to 1/3 times 3 is, of course, 1. But now if we want simplified standard form, notice here that the coefficient of x, this is the a, that's a negative number, which we can't have in simplified standard form. So how we're going to deal with that is we're going to simply multiply both sides by -1. And don't forget to distribute that into both terms over here. So -1 times 2x is just 2x. -1 times 3x would be or 3y would be a -3y, and that equals -1. Now the coefficient of x is positive, and notice here 2, -3, and -1, those don't have any common factors other than 1, so this is now in simplified standard form. Now just one quick little thing. Sometimes you're going to end up with a situation where the coefficients and the constant term do have a common factor other than 1. So suppose we got something like this. 4x plus -6y is equal to -2. Notice here, all three numbers here have the common factor of 2. Easy to deal with that too. All we have to do now is divide both sides by that common factor. And don't forget to distribute the dividing by 2 into both terms there. So 4x divided by 2 is 2x. Plus -6y divided by 2 would be -3y. And now -2 divided by 2 is -1. Now we're back into the situation where these three numbers don't have a common factor. And that's simplified standard form in a nutshell. There's of course more to it, and we'll talk about that in class. But I'm going to leave you with this practice problem. Do it now. While everything's still fresh in your mind, go through all the steps that I just showed in the example. Have those in your notes ready to go at the start of class next time. Thanks for watching.